Hi there, welcome to the video, welcome back if you're a return viewer. You're watching the Christchurch Review of Books, and I'm Kerry. Today it is the May book haul. I'm sitting here at about 7:25 AM on the 31st of May. Yes, it's the last day of autumn down here in the southern hemisphere. Tomorrow winter starts officially. It's been pretty cold and wintry already, so I don't think there's going to be a dramatic change in a hurry. Anyway, so I'm going to shake things up a little bit this time and include some Kindle books. I know I do reviews of them occasionally, but I never usually include them in these book hauls. So as I've had fairly restricted budget lately, there's been some new books come out which I can't quite afford in their hardcover or expensive trade paperback editions. So yeah, I've just stretched a little bit and included Kindle books this time. So without further ado, here's the first one. I hope you can see that properly. I'm not sure about the lighting today. So this is I Love You, Byee by Adam Buxton. Now, Adam Buxton is probably well known to some of you. He's a UK presenter. He was a comedian. He was on TV. He was on radio. But he's probably best known these days for his long-running podcast series where he interviews famous and not so famous people, other comedians, musicians, media stars, what have you. And he does a really good job of it. And he first came to my attention back in about 2016 after the death of the musician David Bowie. Buxton was a massive Bowie fan, and his grief at the loss of his idol was palpable, and he put out some quite moving podcasts in reaction to it. And somehow I got wind of this, and I became a fan of Buxton himself. He's a great guy. He seems to be a genuinely nice guy who reflects pretty much the same things that I feel about life and so on. And well, we hope he's a genuinely nice guy anyway. So a few years ago he put out his first memoir called Ramble Book, in which he talked about his family, friends, life growing up, and his fandom of David Bowie. And he had to deal with the death, I think, of his father in that one. Now he's put out a sequel. Obviously the first one sold well, and this one is called I Love You, Byee, which is his sign-off for his podcast. And this one basically more of the same, and then it deals with the death of his mother, I believe, and his kind of nascent musical career. He's just putting out an album soon, and this memoir has details on how he got into doing that. And I think he just put out his first single maybe a day or so ago. I think it's called Pizza Time. It's nothing deep and meaningful. He does a lot of great interstitial jingles for his own podcast, even his own adverts, and his first single is kind of like following along the same lines as that. Just silly nonsense, but enjoyable all the same. Now, I'm sure the book will be fun to read. He also does some really great audio book versions of his memoirs, so that's something to look out for. So that is Adam Buxton. And man, uses Kindle. Second one here, After the Flying Saucers Came. This is by Greg Ighigian. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that off the top of my head. That's a bit insulting, isn't it? Anyway, now this is a history of ufology, not the UFO cases themselves, but the organised efforts to study it and where it went right and where it went wrong and how it reflects the culture of the Cold War period and so on. I'm a little hesitant to get back into the UFO field. It's something that I've kind of studied off and on since I was about 10 years old. And I really know cycles in it, in boom and bust cycles. And at the moment, the nuts and bolts, aliens are here type of thing seems to be ascendant once again. It kind of goes up and down through the decades, and that kind of things were altering to more social, psycho, cultural explanations for the phenomenon, but now we're all back into, yes, aliens are here riding their jalopies through our sky. So this will be interesting anyway to see how that whole thing occurred in the last 50, 60, 70, 80 years. So that is After the Flying Saucers Came, and I'll try and pronounce that name again, Greg Ighigian. Okay, next one, Man Uses Kindle Again. So this is Fourth Wall Phantoms by Joshua Cutchin. Now Joshua Cutchin has become a quite interesting and unique voice in the paranormal, esoteric, occult type studies thing. I've read several of his books. Last one I read, I think, was Thieves in the Night. Then he's written one about the concept of sources, as in flying saucers. Several books like The Brimstone Deceit about the smells in paranormal studies, and lots of stuff like that. And he's kind of a dedicated researcher. He'll pull disparate strands together about all sorts of esoteric topics and make them comparative to each other, if you like. Now this one intrigued me. Fourth-Wall Phantoms, Reflections on the Paranormal Narrative and Fictions are Becoming Fact. I've read the introduction to this. It's very personal about Cutchin's own time in rehab and how the power of storytelling kind of saved him. And that's what this book is about. It's about cases, stories, histories of fiction and fact becoming intermingled, people claiming to see fictional characters in the real world, the power of narrative and how it seems to be able to alter reality, that type of thing. I know a lot of it's probably a lot of bunkum and made up stuff, but just examples of this type of thing. I've heard it offhand from various sources. Authors claim to have seen their written creations living in the real world, that type of thing. It's quite fascinating. I mean, you don't have to take it too seriously, but just the sense of wonder and mystery, which is kind of what attracts a lot of people to these topics anyway. So that is Fourth Wall Phantoms by Joshua Cutchin. Next up, as man uses the Kindle again, is Normally Weird and Weirdly Normal by Robin Ince. Now, Robin Ince is another UK comedian who has branched out into presenting, and he's become like a leader in science communication, communicating the wonders of science, and he is a massive book nerd. He's written books about his book hunting before, along with other things about his life and his memories, and this one is his personal journey about being diagnosed as neurodivergent, and he basically goes around studying other neurodivergent and kind of investigates what is actually normal, if such a thing exists, what is the neurodiversity in our world. And I've just read the introduction to this, and it's quite fascinating. He seems to be very proud of what he's discovered about himself, and he wants to help others. So that is Normally Weird and Weirdly Normal, My Adventures in Neurodiversity by Robin Ince. Now, I think that is pretty much all the Kindle books, so I'll put the iPad away and we'll get into the actual print stuff. And first up, we have, as tradition in these videos, my nose has started to run, so excuse me if I wipe it occasionally. I know it's gross, but the alternative is me stopping the video and starting again. That doesn't really work well for my thought process. So anyway, first one here. Now these first four books came from Blackwells, the big UK book retailer, which has an online presence, and they've sort of taken over from the dear old Book Depository, which I used to source a lot of international books from, the late great Book Depository, which I miss quite dearly. Nothing has quite replaced it, and so Amazon took it over and shut it down, of course. So anyway, so through Blackwells you can get a lot of different editions of books. It's sort of like what the Book Depository used to do, Depository. And this first one is Hammajang Luck. I had to carefully read that so I could pronounce it. Now this is the first edition of this book. It's later been republished in a hardcover and other editions with a quite more bland cover. This has got this neat cartoony illustration cover. Now this is a supposedly future science fiction cyberpunkish heist novel with queer characters and overtones as well. So if you're into that, this may be one to look for. Now this is basically about a character called Edie who was betrayed and put in prison on some hostile planet in the science fictional future, and she gets out on parole and is contacted by the person who actually betrayed her, and they wanted to do one last job. Of course, you know how all that usually works out in fiction. And the author is Makana Yamamoto, originally from Hawaii, now in the continental US. I don't know anything about this author, but this book is highly regarded. So that's Hammajang Luck. Okay, next up, another author I'm not really familiar with, that is Daryl Gregory. And again, he comes highly recommended, and this is When We Were Real. And this one intrigued me, the descriptions and reviews I've read, so I had to grab a copy. So this basically proposes a future event where we discover that reality is actually a simulation. A lot of people speculate about this, but apparently this is proven. And the story basically begins with a road trip where a bunch of disparate characters get together on a road trip to visit the 7, I think it is, glitches which betray the simulation for what it is. And each of these characters has a backstory to tell and a secret they hold. The kind of Canterbury Tales, Traveller's Tale type of thing, with a kind of a science fictional background. Where have I heard that been done before? Anyway, so like I said, I'm not familiar with the author, but he seems to have written a lot of well-regarded books. So this is When We Were Real. Next up, another author I am familiar with and do enjoy the work of, and that is John Higgs. And this is Exterminate! Regenerate! The Story of Doctor Who by John Higgs. Isn't that a gorgeous cover? Now, Higgs kind of specialises in the kind of intersection of culture, history, reality. His last book was Love and Let Die, which kind of contrasted the Beatles and the character of James Bond, and who came into the public consciousness around the same time, and how they differed and reflected the UK personality. And this one is similar. It's about the history and making of Doctor Who and what that says about culture and society at the times that it was created and what it reflects today. I mean, I've been a Doctor Who fan since I was a child. I haven't quite caught up with the latest series, I have to admit. I'm about 6 episodes behind. I think the final goes out later this morning New Zealand time, so I'll be catching up with that eventually. I'm not a huge fan of the way the latest episodes that I've seen go. Something a little too cute, and they kind of repeat the Doctor's companion is the most important person in the universe trope way too much. But I do enjoy the escapism and the callbacks to the history of the show. I mean, it's a TV show I used to watch after school when I was, 10 years old or whatever. John Pertwee and Tom Baker were the Doctors in those days. For us here in New Zealand, we were years behind the UK showings. And anyway, so Doctor Who has always had a place in my heart. So it'd be interesting to read John Higgs' take on it. Like I said, Higgs is quite an expert cultural commentator. He's good at comparative stuff and showing you what the connections between things. So that is Exterminate, Regenerate by John Higgs. And the last book I got from Blackwells was this little one, The Lake of Darkness by Andy Roberts. Now, Andy Roberts is one of those science fiction, I guess you could say, authors who has kind of bubbled under the scene for like 20 plus years. He's never been massive, except for with his fans and genre fans, and he kind of specialises in putting philosophical arguments and cultural explanation into a science fiction framework. Now, the most famous one is possibly The Thing itself, and This was one of his latest ones. The kind of moral quandaries, philosophical ideas with a ass-kicking science fictional kind of plot. And this is apparently no different. This is Lake of Darkness, and it's about a spaceship in orbit around a black hole in some far future time, and it's a bit of a murder mystery. A couple of people on board the ship are killed, and the person who's accused of killing them says he was commanded to do so by some type of discarnate entity that exists in the black hole. And apparently all sorts of things are investigated leading from this, and it's lots of questions raised, lots of philosophical stuff raised about society, culture, morality, all that type of thing. And this one also comes highly recommended. So that's Lake of Darkness by Adam Roberts. I think I said Andy before, sorry, it's Adam Roberts. Okay, next up, something completely different. Now this is Ginseng Roots by Craig Thompson. Now, Craig Thompson came to my attention many years ago with his book Habibi, which was a kind of telling of comparative religion, love story, Middle East and culture, slavery, all that type of thing in a graphic novel, which was also quite heartwarming, heartrending, emotional. And then from there I went on to read probably his most well-known work, which is Blankets, which is kind of a memoir of first love and family and that type of thing. And it's so well-known and moving that it's actually banned in some places. So take that as it may be for you. So Ginseng Roots is another memoir of his of sorts. It's about his childhood in the state of Wisconsin, where he and a lot of other children were used as pickers for ginseng, the herbal root. And from there he uses this as a launch pad to look at the cultural, social history of ginseng, goes to China, looks what it means to them, and what it's done, changed his life, and all that type of thing. Now, this book attracted me when I saw pictures online because of the artwork is extraordinary. Thompson was always good for his artwork, but he's really outdone himself here. And it's kind of got a kind of 3 or 4 colour red brown tone thing going on, which I'm not sure if you can see properly there, but there are some amazing pages in here. I'm trying to find a good one. Here we go, CIA Secret War. I don't know if that's showing well on the camera. Yeah, so this is it's a very fat graphic novel. It'll take a while for me to read, but you know, these things are quality all of their own. You can see the tremendous work, and I believe there's a section in this book. This was originally put out as a kind of serialized comic over several years, and this has been collected together in this hardcover version. And he also added a new section about how basically drawing this comic, injured his hand. He's got kind of like irreparable hand damage apparently, which affects his drawing abilities. And yes, so that is Ginseng Roots by Craig Thompson, subtitled A Memoir. I am quite eager to read this one because it just looks like a really gorgeous package there. Okay, so that was from Amazon.com.au, but I'm sure your local Amazon will have it as well. Okay, next up, a couple of books I spotted on Arty Bees' site. Now, Arty Bees is a used bookseller in the city of Wellington, here in New Zealand, in the bottom of the North Island, the capital city of New Zealand actually. And they have a website which they constantly update with new used books which arrive there. And I just go there visiting the site occasionally and pick the choice morsels that are on offer. A couple that caught my eye this time, a couple of weeks ago, was this one, Tommy Gun by Byee. Now, Byee is a familiar author to me. He usually writes about military and aerospace topics. Now this is slightly different for him. This is a history as seen via the lens of the Thompson submachine gun. Various historical actions which involve the submachine gun, the people who won medals using the submachine gun, the gangsters, the criminals, the governments. Looks fascinating. I mean, if you can see everything through the lens of an automatic weapon, why not? Yeah, so that will be very interesting. And another one from Arty Bees that I got at the same time with this one, Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warefare by Giles Milton. Title may be familiar to you from a movie that came out a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, with the same name, but that was a fictional movie. This is a non-fiction book about the underhanded sabotage, wrecking type effort against the Nazis by the British. SOE, Special Operations Executive, involved, but then various characters that were promoted through the ranks because of their abilities of blowing things up and wrecking stuff, and they were set loose on Nazi Germany. Sounds good to me. And so that's the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare by Giles Milton. I hope things are showing up on the camera all right. The light in here is not the usual one that I use. So also, okay, next from Reverie Books in Edgware in Christchurch, a small but very well stocked used bookshop on Edgware Road, and it is quite excellent, and it has an online presence as well. And I think this weekend they are offering a sale with the special code that you get 15% off or something. I guess you had to be on their mailing list, so why am I telling you? Anyway, so this is a quite well-known recent book, which I never caught up with when it came out last year, so I found a used copy at Reverie. This is The Ministry of Time by Kellyanne Bradley, apparently her first novel, and it was a hit bestseller. Basically tells the story of a young woman who is suddenly offered a very lucrative civil service job, and her job is to babysit a gentleman with code name 1847, I believe, and just going by the blurb. And it turns out that this gentleman is actually a member of the well-known Franklin expedition to the Arctic in the 19th century. He is recorded in history of having died, but somehow he's been displaced through time, and he is living in a safe house in modern Britain, or future Britain as this may be. And part of her duty, she kind of uncovers the plot, what the government is doing with all this time travel thing, and can she stop something horrible happening, I believe. And as of course her relationship with 1847 grows and blossoms as well. So that is The Ministry of Time by Kellyanne Bradley. Getting near the end now. You may be glad of that. And this last one came to me from Book Hero, which is a fairly new online bookseller here in New Zealand. I wish their range is bigger. They seem to be quite a little limited to what they think they can sell a lot of. And one of those books at the moment is this, The Book of Guilt by Catherine Chidgey. Hope I can pronounce that right. Now, Chidgey is probably the nearest thing New Zealand has to a superstar fiction writer at the moment. I think this book has sold great guns in the New Zealand market, and every article about her makes a big point of telling us how she's widely read overseas and published in the UK and US markets. And oddly enough, I don't actually see much about her overseas media, but she is very widely read in New Zealand. I am unsure if I've read anything from her before. I don't think so. Now, this one caught my eye because it is an alternate history story with sort of sinister overtones. It's about 3 13-year-old boys being brought up in an alternate history UK in the 1970s, where things are slightly off. There is a female prime minister, but there's a sort of state-run eugenics or something going on. I think part of the joy of this book is the mystery unfolding. These boys are living in some sort of state-run care and being brought up with strict rules by strict nursemaids or something. For what reason? We don't know. And this whole system is about to be wiped away, and they're going to have to learn to socialise to live in the supposed real world. Now, why they're in these systems, what's going on. I think part of the clue is in many reviews kind of liken this to Ishikawa's Never Let Me Go, which, spoilers, the result was that the kids in that book were being brought up as organ donors for rich people. Is there something similar going on in this book? I don't know. But people seem to bring up Ishikawa's book a lot when reviewing this. So that is The Book of Guilt by Catherine Chidgey. I better get the author's names right occasionally. Okay, so that is pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed the book haul for this month. Some people question why I do them. I think it's good to bring certain books to the attention of people out there. Some books don't get any publicity unless they're big sellers or they've got a hype machine behind them. So if I'm introducing a book that nobody knew existed, or somebody viewing this video didn't know existed but was interested in, that's a good thing, I think. So I don't know why I felt the need to explain myself there. Anyway, next up, probably in a few days, I'll be doing a review of Carved in Blood, the third Hannah Westerman crime thriller by Michael Bennett. I didn't really like the second one. I think things may have changed a bit for the 3rd, so that's a little hint at what my review will look like. So that one will be coming possibly later this weekend. It's a long weekend here in New Zealand. King's birthday weekend. Monday is the King's birthday holiday. Used to be called Queen's birthday when up until a few years ago for obvious reasons. I believe it's not actually ever been a monarch's birthday since about the 1930s, but they've just kept the holiday as a tradition. It's an annual holiday in the Commonwealth countries anyway. So that is the end of this video pretty much. I hope you enjoyed it, like I said. Hope you have a good day there, good afternoon, evening, morning, whenever you're watching this, as I keep saying. And we'll catch you next time. Cheers.